Hi, next slide, please. Hi, I'm Rhonda Taylor. I'm the Director of Partnerships and Program Engagement at AmeriCorps. Next slide, please. It's my great pleasure to welcome you today, and I'm so glad that you could join us in preparation for the 9/11 National Day of Service and Remembrance, and of course, other volunteer and service activities you may do throughout the year. This webinar today is on bridging, an important topic and one that we think communities and organizations have an important role in addressing. I know that the resources presented today will help you in your role as conveners and leaders. Through having these webinars earlier and more focused on individual topics, we hope you gain information that sparks ideas and directs you to resources that will help you, your organization, and your community honor and serve on days of service like MLK Day and 9/11 and throughout the year. Our future webinars will address tips for volunteer management, a broadly focused webinar on other resources and ideas for projects, and finally, using AmeriCorps tools and resources to market and promote your work. If you missed our first two webinars on supporting veterans and military families and climate, addressing climate, they were recorded and will be online soon. The veterans one is already online and the other one will be up soon. Please let me reiterate, use the Q&A feature to ask questions during the presentations, or you can hold your questions to the end when we will ask you to raise your hand and queue up for questions, as well as answer those that have been submitted in the Q&A. Before I turn it over to our presenters today, I encourage all of you to visit our website, become a 9/11 Day champion if you aren't already before August 1st, and use our resources. And once you've determined what and where your project is, please register it so we and others will know of your project and be inspired to serve or join you in service. Next slide, please. It's my great pleasure now to welcome Jennifer Leschnauer, our new Strategic Partnerships, Democracy and Bridging Fellow. Jen will be leading the agency's body of work in this topic, and we're so glad that she's here. Her most recent experiences include serving as a special advisor for member experience at California Volunteers. And she's also a proud Peace Corps volunteer and AmeriCorps Vista alum. So Jen, with that, I'm going to turn it over to you and welcome everyone.
Thank you so much, Rhonda. And I also extend my thanks to all of our wonderful participants and presenters today. It's great to see so many wonderful faces and hear from all of you. I am based in DC on the ancestral lands of the Anacostans and the neighboring Piscataway and Pamunkey peoples. I, as Rhonda said, just joined the AmeriCorps Strategic Partnership team via California Volunteers. And for the better part of 2 decades, I focused on maximizing the potential of people and programs through storytelling, leadership investment, and mission-driven endeavors. Next slide, please. And Rhonda spoke to a lot of this already, so we're just going to push through to the next slide. Great. So briefly, I want to share a little bit of what I'll be working on at the agency. I have the distinct privilege of supporting the agency's commitments to bridging divides through service and volunteerism. I will be helping to advance and deepen our collective work through innovation and exploration with national, regional, state, and local partners, service commissions, research bodies, to name a few. Also working directly with community members, faith leaders, elected officials, corporate leaders, and lay leaders in refining and redefining what's possible with trusted, long-term, and engaged individuals relating to one another. I'm excited to be joining the work that you are already doing in your communities to really amplify that work, to show what works best, and to continue to build bridges. So I'm really thrilled to be working with bridging forward partners like yourselves. Next slide. Let me start by offering some grounding language that unites our understanding of bridging. I found it most helpful to start broadly and then follow the yes and thinking. And as I share today's definition, please feel free to use the chat feature to share how your organization defines bridging, or as you're thinking about bridging, how you would define it. Backed by research in human behavior, cognition, and psychology, the Greater Good Science Center at UC Berkeley defines bridging as making connections across differences. And then would you mind clicking a few times? There's a few other bullet points in that slide. And importantly, includes practicing empathy, displaying curiosity, suspending judgment, seeing humanity in others, and finding shared values in divergent opinions and beliefs. So bridging is a yes and kind of concept. And as you hear that definition, hope that that resonates with you. Next slide. With the definition at hand, research informs our thinking and helps us find the data-backed whys. And I'm a glass half full kind of person, and so hope that despite these challenging statistics, you are equally motivated by what's possible through bridging. Despite 1/3 of Americans feeling disconnected, we know that intentional trust-building activities can spur belonging, connection, and meaningful relationships. The decline we're seeing in quality time with friends started pre-pandemic and has continued. We know that being in service with one another in the community and spending time together spurs cultural connections, most often taking place in communal spaces. These points of social cohesion and contact counters an epidemic of loneliness and isolation felt by many, and recently raised by the Surgeon General as a growing public health concern. So hopefully the definition alongside research resonates with you and helps lead you to a set of questions and answers you can do with your community networks on how to introduce and/or how to continue practicing effective bridging activities. Next slide, please. So bridging relies on the willing navigation of trust-building activities and conversation among folks with different lived experiences and perspectives. And just want to make sure, let's click one more time. I think you'll see yeah. So I'm going to show 3 questions that will help you really perhaps start the conversation or continue to reflect on the conversation you're having in your community. So when you bring these folks together with different lived experience and perspectives, you are kind of creating the power to both relate to one another and also be in relationship with them. The work is first and foremost about building trust through intentional activities. And so while it is admirable to bring people together of diverse demographic, ideological, religious, or social lenses, the work of bridging, the effectiveness of bridging comes when you dig further and really work towards building trusting relationships. And that can happen through a variety of ways in which we'll talk through a little bit today, some of those examples. But bridge building is relational. It requires intentionality. There is not one right way to do this. There's many right ways. And with some of the activities that you learn about today or the ones that you do yourselves, you know that it is sometimes best received with a skilled facilitator or trainer. And other times it's okay and acceptable and really meaningful to bring individuals together who just have that capacity to be a bridge builder and want to learn bridging skills. So there's some bridging activities that will really benefit from having a guide, a facilitator, and oftentimes we see in our peer groups, in our ambassadors, and those we see in our community who are stepping up as leaders, they have that inclination and desire to be a bridger. Next slide. So the rub here is that we look at effective bridge building activities. We know that the greatest impact, like any skill, attitude, or behavior, improves with time and practice. And so on the X and Y axis here, we're looking at intensity. And on the Y one, we're looking at effort, growing trust, and growing relationship building. The more consistent and repetitive we are in activities, bridging will repay us manifold. And during this fellowship, I am hopeful that some of the agency's future research work will yield greater clarity on the efficiency and effectiveness rates of bridging in relation to the longevity and intensity of activities. We still don't know how much bridging will really move the needle and how often someone needs to do it in practice to be feeling super confident or really to move that gap, close that gap of the polarization or disconnection we feel. We're still learning what that will take. With that said, there are some low-hanging fruits using open source materials that embody the spirit of bridging and honor its definition. Creating an environment or space for curiosity, discussion, and an initial connection acknowledges that bridging is more than bringing different people together. If bridging is a new concept or term to your community, the way it will appear in day-long days of service can start off small, yet be consequential. As you think about the voices and perspectives that might be coming to you for the first time and or for just one day, you'll want to think about your why, their why, and how to explore those questions and answers with one another. You'll have an opportunity to breathe life into these answers through everything you think about through your day of service, from the logistics of the day to the activities. And so when I say logistics, I mean things like, does everyone get a name tag with their name? And perhaps you take one step further and select, or they self-select an identity which they wish to share with others. Is there a welcome banner? You know, some of the things that seem almost the basics can really set up that space where you're really entering into a place where you're welcoming folks who feel like they're coming together to do something together, but they may not know a soul. And so, or they do know someone else, but there's some piece of them that they've never learned about before. It can be in the volunteer assignments and how you distribute your teams, making sure that you might come with a pair, but you're paired up with two new people that you've never met before. That you provide dialogue prompts or conversation starters that really get people talking to each other. That you do an icebreaker that really creates that sense of sharing and belonging. And I'm going to share something about myself. I'm going to hear where you're coming from. We're going to find some mutual connection points, and then we're going to find things that are very different about what drives us here today. It can be woven into welcome speeches. And then also, of course, passive and active drawing or storyboards that are like, what brings you here today? Everyone writes down why they're here, and then you can see that. So there's lots of ways throughout the day, throughout conversation and activity, and throughout the way you make people make people feel that really supports that bridging environment. You may come to think of these bridging activities as introducing an environment conducive to ongoing bridging and really support an attitude of this community really is working to connect with one another. And ultimately help volunteers learn that to flourish as a volunteer or as an individual in my community, this expectation that we are going to get to know one another at a deeper level and build trust over time is our ultimate goal. As you move along the XY axes, you may think of collaborators or leaders who embody, role model, or advocate for continued skill building, but are also open to behavioral change and norm setting. They may be ambassadors of your efforts who are willing to explore their values and that of others. And there are a variety of curricular, long-term, or more significant intensity type bridging activities, some of which we'll learn about today, that will really push you from some of the lower hanging fruits to some medium and high range ongoing bridging activities that might start at your days of service or may come and percolate through those days throughout the calendar year. To Rhonda's point, we hope that the resources we provide today are really long lasting. And whether it be a day of service or the way you think about programming or design, or the way you think about your volunteer or service programming, you can pull in some of these resources. Next slide. So it's with pleasure that I introduce you to the work of Interfaith America and Constructive Dialogue Institute, both in their own right leaders in the field of bridging work and consummate partners to me at California Volunteers and now at the agency. Each will share a brief snapshot about how their evidence-based work influences their program design, activity library, and curricular tools, many of which are available to us as we explore the best fit for our multi-faith days of service and beyond. Next slide. Amina Khan from Interfaith America, I want to thank you for being here today and share your insights and advice with us. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Jen. Thanks everyone for having us here. It's so great to see in the chat people coming from all across the nation just to learn some resources and more about bridge building. It's very exciting. We can advance the slide, please. So as Jen mentioned, my name is Amina Khan. I am a program manager here at Interfaith America. One of the projects that I'm currently working on and most excited about is our Team Up project, and that's what I'm going to speak to you all about. You can advance the slide, please. So the Team Up project started at the United We Stand Summit in September of 2002, where President Biden announced a bridge building initiative. In order to address the current polarization going on in our nation, President Biden asked that national organizations come together and work together to help bring bridge building to the forefront of the nation's conversation. So these organizations include Habitat for Humanity, Catholic Charities, the YMCA, and Interfaith America. Through this initiative, we decided to work with 30 agencies. So each of these organizations, Catholic Charities, Habitat for Humanity, and YMCA, nominated 10 affiliates throughout the nation to come together in this team up model. So what these organizations do is already kind of bridge building, right? It's inherent in their work to bring people together. So the Team Up initiative was just a way to make it more explicit and to kind of deepen that work and actually name what was actually going on. So these agencies that were chosen, the 10 from each organization, came together. They received a 3-day long training on bridge building, and they were able to identify that, yes, we're already doing this work. We didn't maybe have language around it, but now we have an ability to hone our skills to deepen that work. You can go to the next slide. So one opportunity that Team Up also had was to work with AmeriCorps partners in Texas during the National Service Blitz hosted by Habitat for Humanity. So this was an abridged version of the broader training, the Team Up training. It was really wonderful to work with AmeriCorps service members because, like I said, you're already doing this work. So just to kind of put a name to it and say that, hey, some of the projects you're doing are actually bridge building. And here's a way where you can zero in on some of those skills, right? Like Jen mentioned, make it intentional, have dialogue prompts or, have a welcome sign and do things that make people feel like, okay, we're in a space where we're also being seen, for our differences and that we can come together because of our differences. So it was great. The AmeriCorps members served through Catholic Charities, Habitat for Humanity, and the YMCA. So they came together. It was almost a type of bridge building in that sense because they usually don't work together, but they're doing similar things. And it was wonderful to see them share their experiences and to hear from the CEO of AmeriCorps and hear that AmeriCorps is valuing bridge building as we see with Jen's position being a fellow to advance this work. You can advance the slide. Thank you. So just to give you all an example of some of the work being done through these agencies. So Team Up is in a pilot year. It's all very new, and so we're eager to see what comes of it. Some of our early wins you can see on the slide. So for example, in Catholic Charities, they're able to focus on projects that are bridging across lines of race and class. And some affiliates are focused on building relationships between marginalized groups and business leaders. So that was unique to their, excuse me, their community's needs. Excuse me, the air quality in Chicago today is not good. So they were able to bridge that gap between business leaders and provide opportunities to marginalized groups by hosting listening sessions, right? Something simple. It doesn't have to be this big daunting thing. It's something that maybe you're already doing. For Habitat for Humanity, one of their early wins right now is they're able to address divisive topics. A big issue that one of their communities is facing is LGBTQ plus housing discrepancies, and so they wanted to bring that to the forefront, and so they're able to do that by partnering with other community organizations. So it's nice to see you don't have to just work in your own silo. Like, feel free to reach out to other people in your community who maybe have a better sense of what the needs are. A lot of times we want to do service initiatives and we're like, where do we start? So get in there and talk to folks and hear about what are their needs. And then for the YMCA, some of their early wins is they're able to do bridge building between existing communities and refugees and new Americans. So this is another example where they partnered with social service organizations and really got a sense of what is it that the community needs and how can we come in and help close that gap. So they're creating a service corps of volunteers to help lead those kind of initiatives. So it's not always this huge big thing that you're doing. Sometimes it's a small thing. It's a community garden. That was one of the needs. There's a food desert, and so they called all the people together. This is something we can all get behind, is planting a community garden. And in that experience, you get to know each other. You get to find out about other aspects of somebody that you didn't know. As Jen mentioned, sometimes you're working alongside somebody in service, but you didn't get to know their faith background or their cultural background, and really start building those relationships of trust, so that in the future, when you do service projects, you have this community that you can call on that will work with you. And I think, is that my last slide? One more slide. Yeah, so some of the resources, as Jen mentioned, Interfaith America, YMCA Catholic Charities, Habitat for Humanity, they have a great deal of resources. A lot of ours are on our website and they're free to access. Two that I wanted to highlight today for you all is the We Commemorate toolkit. So We Commemorate, We Commit toolkit is created in the light of 9/11, trying to help communities have dialogue and healing. In the wake of such a tragic event, the country was shaken. A lot of hate crimes happened, a lot of healing needed to happen. So this toolkit really gives you some, concrete ways of how do we start those dialogues and how do we start the healing in communities. And then also the shared values facilitation guide. So this is a really nice tool. If you're thinking about, okay, I have a group of people that are coming from different backgrounds, but how do I get them to start talking, or how should I initiate that conversation and not have it feel so awkward? So we have a facilitation guide there that can help you lead, interfaith dialogues and conversation around shared values. And it's around a whole host of different things. Sometimes it's about, environmental care. I heard you all had a webinar on that. And then, or alleviating poverty or hospitality and forgiveness. So topics that everybody can kind of come around. And then just hear the shared ideals and thoughts of your community members. And I'll hand it back to you, Jen.
Thank you so much, Amina. This was amazing. And what I really pulled out of this is that bridging work is flexible and adaptable and really needs to reflect the priorities or your personal community's why. And so there are some overarching themes and ideas and ideals that we work through in bridging work. We'll hear more from Mike about that. But really, the intricacy of what is needed in your community is a really important thing not to lose. So thank you so much for your expertise and your contribution today. Mike, thanks for being here today. I've been a student and beneficiary of the Perspectives curriculum, and I'm thrilled to have you here to share the floor with me. So it's all yours, Mike.
Great, thank you. Thanks for having us as part of this, and we're always excited when we can be here alongside Interfaith America because we love what they're doing as well. But so, like Jen said, my name is Mike Wasserman. I'm the Vice President of Growth at the Constructive Dialogue Institute, which basically means I lead all of our kind of external programmatic partnerships. And so as an organization, we do a lot of work with educational communities, so high schools and colleges. We work with close to 1,000 across the country, but we also work with religious communities, workplaces, local government teams, and more and more AmeriCorps communities as well. So next slide. Yeah, this is who I am. I won't spend much time on this. I'll just say I come to this bridging work. I've spent really my whole career in education, working with young people. I spent a long time working with students on debate programs that were focused on kind of empathy building and perspective taking. And in many ways, this dialogue and bridging work is the very same thing. It's about helping people kind of understand perspectives beyond their own, find common humanity, kind of build that empathy muscle across lines of division that I think it's becoming harder in this country for people to kind of find empathy and connection around. But next slide. So I just, in the time I've got, I just wanted to share a few things. One, essentially with the Constructive Dialogue Institute, who we are. So we're a national nonpartisan nonprofit organization. We were founded shortly after the 2016 presidential election, which I think a lot of the kind of bridging sector as it exists today kind of came up in that time. And the lens that we take to this work is that there are actually a lot of organizations doing kind of incredible work that are actually bringing people together, like Interfaith and what Amina was talking about. And the piece that the Constructive Dialogue Institute has tried to play in this space is to really help provide people whatever model for coming together you all have, whatever the kind of format, whether it's a day of service or it's kind of people coming together around a dinner table, whether it's being in a classroom together over the course of a year, whether it's working together in or being in service for a year. What we've tried to do is take from behavioral science, from research around intergroup dialogue, intergroup contact theory, the things that we know to be true from research, and bring it to communities to say, here are some of the tools and practices that can be foundational skills for people to really feel comfortable being in community with one another across difference. And so we do that in two ways. One is we conduct research on how to do bridging work and what the best practices are. And then two, we build some actual tools and resources that can be used as foundational skill building. So a couple of things that I just wanted to share on the research side of things. One, we talk about constructive dialogue, but in many ways it can be interchangeable with bridging, because really the idea is, how do people constructively engage with one another? And in our research, some of what we use as kind of a philosophical base for ourselves are these 5 principles. And I think they often can work as norms or kind of pillars in the design of programming around bridging, regardless of what it looks like. And really a lot of it focuses on this idea of moving away from winning. If two people come together across difference and really we're both trying to convince the other that we're right, it never works, right? And what we know is that in fact, people get more dug into their own beliefs. They actually listen less. And so instead of this kind of orientation around, I need you to believe what I believe, we really focus more on how people can hear each other and step into another perspective. And so the power of storytelling to create spaces where people can lead not with facts, but with stories. This is why I believe, this is what I believe and where it comes from, is a real humanizing element. It's a way that people can hear it more effectively. We talk about the power of asking questions. If you share something and I disagree, to kind of come back with inquiry is actually a very research tested way to build trust. If I ask you a further question rather than kind of immediately coming back with a defensive response, people are much more likely to then listen when it's my turn to share. And so these are some of the things we found that really make a difference. In terms of the research itself, what I've linked here, and if this slide deck is shared afterwards, you can kind of click through the links, but if not, it's on our website, constructivedialogue.org, is we've done a lot of research into what actually the benefits of bridging are. And we think about a few key concepts that we measure as part of bridging. We talk about affective polarization, which is really this feeling of hostility across difference. We talk about intellectual humility, which is this willingness to interrogate our own views and listen to others. And then we talk about kind of community skills like conflict resolution, belonging, and psychological safety. And what we've seen is that when those things are prioritized in a community, we see conflict go way down, especially across difference. We see ethical frameworks being upheld much more robustly. And then when people have priorities around inclusivity, belonging, kind of DEIB work, we actually see that increase significantly as well. And one note, and again, I won't go into it in too much depth because I know there's a lot to get through here, but we've actually done some research around the relationship between bridging and inclusion and equity work, because sometimes people feel like there's this tension between bridging and DEI or racial equity or what the different names are in different places. And so we've put together some research along with the Aspen Institute on actually ways to do bridging that doesn't feel like it deepens inequality or isolates or marginalizes people regardless of the power they're bringing to a situation. And just a couple of the things that I'll name, it's, we talk about design elements of any kind of bridging activity that makes space for personal identity. I think one of the things that's really important is often, whether intentionally or by accident, people will often talk in broad strokes about kind of like groups. And so it's like we versus they, or kind of everyone in this room believes a certain thing, but we're going to go to a community that believes something different. And in reality, there are many more differences within a group than across. And we know that to be true from the research. And so any kind of activity that kind of what we call complexifies, that allows people to share more narratives, to actually see how much difference there is, even within a like group, actually allows for there to be more space, more personal identity within a group, and that allows that group to then engage more personally across. And so there's more here, but maybe go to the next slide just to share some of what we've built that we've made available. And again, so basically everything we provide is really designed to be kind of foundational skill building, kind of a entry point to the deeper conversations that can happen. So we have a few free resources. One is a conversation simulator. It's actually an online tool for someone who's nervous about going into an interaction. They can go through this program and over 10 minutes actually practice how to engage and have this. We built this for two reasons. One, for the 2020 election, for people that were afraid of talking with friends and family about the election. And they said, I got to practice it first. And related, we built it for Thanksgiving because people were saying, I don't have a way to actually talk with my family across the dinner table. Another thing that we kind of have is a blog where we try to spotlight organizations like Interfaith and others that are providing really good tools, and also stories. Like we just put on the blog a story of a student at Michigan who actually led the effort to, I'll use her language, to cancel someone on campus. And then the experience of later building a relationship with this person and saying, actually, there was not a barrier as broad as I thought there was. For any communities that are working with students, Jen mentioned this program Perspectives. It's a 4 to 8 week kind of online learning program that really gives a deep set of norms and practices around how to have conversations across difference. It's totally free. We have a totally free version on our website that is student focused. So anyone that's working with students can access that, create a program, and it's a great kind of intro to kind of longer term work together. We do have versions for adult communities, religious communities. It has a cost, and so I'm not here trying to sell that, but if anyone is interested, there are those kind of research tested tools for adult communities. And we've had about 60,000 people go through this program and done a ton of research that shows it has really powerful depolarizing effects. So with that, let me stop. I think I've probably gone over my time here.
No, wonderful, Mike, and thank you so much. We are going to continue to drop resources in our chat, and we'll come back to 2 questions that came up during Mike's session. But for now, we're going to move to the next slide. And we also have the honor of hearing from one other amazing speaker. So this slide should have been at the end, and that was my fault, but just want to let you all know that we will be, and it's in chat now. You can download it. All of the links that Mike and Amina and Nick, who will be next, reference, will be available to you in chat, and then we'll make sure it gets more widely distributed when it's ready with the recording. But Mike, thank you, and thank you, Amina. I'm going to turn it over to Rhonda to take us home.
Hi, everyone. It's my great pleasure to introduce to you Nick Haberman. Nick is a fourth-generation teacher from Pittsburgh. And in 2018, he was named the Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh's Holocaust Educator of the Year. He has many more awards as teacher and citizen, and it's my great pleasure to introduce him to talk about his work and how you might engage in similar work. Nick, all yours.
Thank you so much. You can go on to the next slide, please. And this one we're going to leave up for a while. That's just a little bit about how to contact me if you would like to after the fact and see what we're up to on Instagram. And that QR code takes you to our impact report for the last year. So what I've created is a program that is an education-based program. And hopefully what you get out of me talking about it a little bit is some turnkey activities or turnkey resources that you can take away, because obviously my program is really built on a lot of in-person supports, but on the whole, what you're seeing is that you can sort of build these networks and you can build these types of opportunities for service in your region and use all these best practices from all over the place. So it's really great what, I think what we've all heard today so far. So the overview of Light and what this program is that it's a program that was created by me as a teacher to solve a problem that I found in my classroom. So I identified that problem and that opportunity for a solution after a visit from a Holocaust survivor with my 9th grade American history students. So a little background, I was not raised Jewish. The Holocaust was not part of my story. So I felt grossly unprepared as an educator to teach something like the Holocaust or something like, combating anti-Semitism or any form of identity-based violence. So in my first year of teaching, when faced with this challenge, I reached out to an organization who were the experts in my region, the Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh, to help me out. So the problem that I found is I felt like I was alone in my quest to create the next generation of humanitarians. And I felt like I was completely unprepared, not only to teach the Holocaust, but to, like I said, combat all forms of identity-based violence and discrimination. The reality was I very much was not alone, but I couldn't find a program, a movement, a network that existed to support educators and young people to connect us together with a common goal while providing the necessary perpetual in-person support. So that's what I wanted to create, and that's what Light is. So when the Holocaust survivor visited my school, his name was Jack Sitzhammer, and when he shared his family's story of tragedy with my students, he demonstrated the power of a profound curricular anchor. So learning about genocides and human rights violations, when done well in a safe and supportive environment, can accomplish three things that I found. It can inspire people, it can help to prepare people, and it can help to empower people. So luckily, the Holocaust is on the books in the majority of American school districts in some form or another. We know it takes many different forms, but teachers and schools aren't necessarily prepared or equipped to deliver what we started to call quality Holocaust education. Though good resources are necessary, where I've seen the most powerful Holocaust education is within what we call a community of sharing, where educators in a region are supporting one another, connecting students together from multiple school districts, and then partnering with local organizations and nonprofits to plan programs and events that are accessible to family members and the broader community. So building these bridges and walking across them. A study of the Holocaust can be a successful entry point into these lessons that center remembrance, compassion, mental health, social justice, and the three principles of EIB, equity, inclusion, and belonging, which is a major focus in Pennsylvania, and I'm sure in a lot of places. When done right, what we've seen is a lesson on the Holocaust can lead students to student-led advocacy against contemporary anti-Semitism and identity-based violence. So it can be an opportunity to transform remembrance of the past into advocacy and action for the present, utilizing STEM skills learned from grades K through 12. Today, American school systems very much center something called STEM education, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, the science, tech, engineering, math. Sometimes an A is in there and it's STEAM. Sometimes an R is in there and it's STREAM. Sometimes they keep building the acronym. But if we take it back down to STEM for a second, it teaches students in our communities, young people in our communities, how to be incredibly innovative thinkers and creative problem solvers. So what Light is meant to be is it's a program and an approach to help students apply their STEM skills to the problems faced in America today and always, which is the various forms of identity-based violence and discrimination, and also the problems faced by American school systems, which could be called the lack of funding and support for teachers to do this difficult service-based work that, as we've seen, can be quite divisive. So our school systems respond very, very well to incentive-based programs that have support and funding, but our school system doesn't respond very well to mandates or unfunded suggestions. So many teachers feel under-resourced, schools underfunded. Light is meant to be an incentive-based program to help school districts meet their own inherent capacities to counter hate and create what we call in Pennsylvania safe schools. And a safe school in Pennsylvania is one that is free from fear and harassment of any kind. And that comes down from our Department of Education. So LIGHT is an acronym. It stands for Leadership Through Innovation in Genocide and Human Rights Teaching. And it's become the flagship educational outreach program of the Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh, which is a 42-year-old organization that recently helped to create a new nonprofit organization called Tree of Life, which was created in response to the October 27, 2018 Tree of Life synagogue shooting. The new organization is designed to be a national leader in the effort to end anti-Semitism. LIGHT supports students and teachers in their efforts to be innovative within their study of genocide and human rights by providing supported opportunities to apply these STEM skills to school-based advocacy. And our theory is that since hate is a learned behavior, and it's much easier to teach a child to love than it is to teach them not to hate, LIGHT is a K through 12 program, so kindergarten through 12th grade, that seeks to lift up traditionally marginalized groups and practice active bystandership, or what we call being an upstander. So in practice, how does this help anyone on this call? This takes the form of student-led celebrations and commemorations of heritage months and cultural observances, of community library programs that are supported by students, of art projects, writing workshops, student leadership summits, field trips that actually have a volunteer component, not just like a, hey, look at this and leave, but like a, hey, while we're here, let's make a difference. And daily access, what we strive for is creating daily access in school systems for students to have a trained and supported LIGHT coordinator, a teacher, in their school's LIGHT center, which is the hub where this happens, to help connect all of the local advocacy and action. So this is a place where students can make in the realm of the humanities. So though LIGHT is currently based in Southwestern PA, there are obviously plans for us to expand nationally. Right now, the only thing standing in the way is funding. But if you, like many people on this call, including me, are not in the position to provide funding, but you are in a position to give your time, then you're in luck. So even though our community of sharing that I manage lives in Southwestern PA, we have the internet. So obviously we're connecting to one another right now. We can continue to do that after this call to talk about, how you can apply this philosophy in your region. But it also means that you can just take what I have said, and if you haven't seen it yet in your schools and communities, you can help young people on their quest to become the next generation of humanitarians by supporting them. So one way to do that, a turnkey activity right now, is to find a group of young people, maybe going into the upcoming school year. And for the upcoming and ongoing days of service that we have, you can co-design a program along with them, meaning ask them what change they would like to see within their school or community, and then help make that change a reality with them through strategic, purposeful partnerships, which schools sometimes struggle to achieve. And you can support those young people with, you know, a compassionate, trustworthy adult in their life. So that's you and the teachers of the school district, the administrators, your community leaders. And the point here is to let the students, the young people, help to design solutions with you, and you can help them make those things a reality, hopefully with them as the leaders, but you can follow through with this together. So there's a support network. So those schools weren't traditionally designed to promote innovation. Thanks to STEM, they are now. They have drastically changed in the last few decades, and they're set to become what we call beacons that promote safer and more compassionate communities. So our best intervention is to support the teachers that have been tasked with nurturing our future humanitarians, and by asking our teachers to do less with more, not more with less. So if you'd like to speak after the call or reach out to me on here, I'm available, and I hope to see you in your community some days. But until then, find those teachers that are doing the work and figure out how to support them and connect them to these purposeful partners that can lift up their work and lift up traditionally marginalized individuals to combat all forms of identity-based violence and discrimination. Thank you. Oh, and if you go to the next two slides real quick, you can just see, since this is going to you, you can go to the next one. This is, these are just two slides for you to be able to share what it is I've said in, you know, in 30 seconds. Thank you.
Thank you again to our presenters. We'd like to open it up for questions, and the one that is here is, will we have access to this PowerPoint after the webinar concludes? It takes us about a week to get it up online, but we do put the PowerPoint and the recording up online. So absolutely. Are there other questions that we may not have answered, or anything that our presenters would like to follow up with? Jen, Mike, Nick?
There was one question that Jessica asked, and I answered it, but for anyone that's not looking at that Q&A, I guess I'll just throw out that Jessica was asking about kind of this stories over facts, and I appreciate you naming that, because also I don't want to give the, you know, obviously that we're in a time where, you know, facts can be we don't want to lose the importance of that, right? We're not saying that that doesn't matter, but I think what we were saying is that, especially when you're trying to create events where two people or small groups of people are coming together across difference, what we know from the research is the way that people are most likely to kind of open up and actually listen or hear that other person's perspective is when they understand the why of it. And so if you have two people that are talking about guns in America, and one person says, you know, I think I would feel good if every single household had a gun, because, you know, and the other person said, I don't think there should be one gun in this entire country, right? To just kind of, people could throw back and forth kind of facts and figures that support their view. And usually what happens is that people are more dug in. They feel like they're trying to get convinced, and so they listen less. And so that it kind of ends the relationship in many cases. But instead, if someone says, you know, the reason I believe this is because, you know, my mother's house was broken into, she didn't have a gun, and I just think like that I wish that I had been there to protect her, and that's where it comes from, this feeling of protecting family, and I don't trust anyone else to do that, and I just learned that I can't. Then it's not about changing that other person's view, but all of a sudden you're like, okay, I see the human being here and where they're coming from, and it opens up for more conversation. Now, you all as organizational leaders, that doesn't mean that you can't share facts and figures. It's more about kind of the relationship of those people that are sitting at a table or kind of working on the community garden or things like that.
Yeah, just to echo you, Mike, you know, when you share your personal experience, it becomes kind of invitational for the other person to share their experience. And then what we always say here is it makes it like a non-debatable format. Like you can't argue my personal experience, right? And so then we can start talking a little bit deeper and almost beyond the facts and figures on a closer level.
For me,
Didn't someone ask if they could reach out to you later to follow up on resources?
yes, please do. In the PDF that was dropped in chat includes my email address, and wanted to ask that of all of you, that like I am just beginning this work at the agency. I'm very excited about it, and just want to acknowledge that in addition to these 3 wonderful presenters, many of you are probably doing bridging work. And I think part of the challenge is just connecting one another. I think that was a real theme in today's presentations around really, if we'll go with the visual here of a bridge, like a lot of this is really providing connection points to one another. And I really like that word that Nick used around being a beacon. I think if we all work very hard to uplift the unique efforts in our community, and can start really drawing the connection points between bringing community together in the name of unity, in the name of closing the gap and closing the divide, then we can really feel inspired by the efforts there. And then what I hope today provided is, yes, we do that, and we'd like more support or resources that we know have been tested and evaluated, and really lift up the strong work that a curriculum provides. So in addition to the ones presented here, I don't know if she's on anymore, but Serve Ohio has a Service Speaks curriculum that is linked in the resources document, and it is really geared towards AmeriCorps members. I also want to lift up Center for Interfaith Cooperation, which is an AmeriCorps program, but also does significant work in Indiana. And on September 10th of this year, they're going to be doing a festival of faith. And so have really great resources around how they are bringing multi-faith community members together in the name of community, in the name of communicating with each other, learning from each other, and really figuring out how to support religious diversity in their community. And ultimately, what we're trying to do with bridging is really make sure our democracy lasts, our diverse democracy, it moves into the next 250 years, and we can be proud of who we all are and what we bring to the table to have that continue to flourish. Any other questions or comments?
We have a question that says, does anyone have any ideas, examples of 9/11 day of service project work they are working on now? Sarah, I'm assuming, do you mean related to bridging? Sarah Bass. Jen just mentioned one in Ohio.
I'm hopeful that Rhonda, and maybe, and again, I'm new to the agency, but the champions for days of service like 9/11 is where I hope we will start to find those leaders and those projects in community. So if you are on the call today and this has helped you really spur, like, great, I was just looking for one piece to help me get that day of service off the ground with a multi-faith service lens, then I hope you will register your project and become a champion. But I honestly am looking for those. I'm looking for that answer as well, because I do want to really begin to pull together even more examples of ways, concrete ways that service projects with a multi-faith lens are working, utilizing bridging and or other resources that really help people have conversation, be in community with each other, learn from one another. And so it's a great question, and it's one I don't have a full answer to.
And Jen, if I could add, where we usually start with our networks is first with whatever group of people that we happen to be working with who seem really engaged. We ask them, whenever we commemorate 9/11, to us, what's our best intervention? Should we be thinking about how to combat Islamophobia? Should we be thinking about how to support first responders? Should we be, there's so many different lenses that 9/11 can be seen through. And so if you start with that group of active and engaged individuals and ask them, that's where this co-design approach comes in, where we're designing this program together, and then you can think about who are our purposeful strategic partners that we want to bring in. Maybe it's a mosque, maybe it's this other organization, maybe it's for the local fire departments, maybe, whatever it is, it starts to build. And that's where we see things like really get a lot of buy-in, and it becomes a very successful event, rather than starting with what we think people want and then trying to get people to be involved. So we sort of like reverse, I guess, engineer this thing. But co-design has been most successful for our programs, at least where I live.
Good point. I've also seen over the years that in the example of post 9/11, when people did come together and they really didn't, I know there were issues around Islamophobia, and there were communities that suffered as a result. But we also had a huge outpouring of humanity, and when we can find that in our work around 9/11, our humanity and meeting an immediate need for others is a really important piece of the day as well. I have to just say for a second that I was really touched by your presentations, because I'm from a small town in Arkansas, and relationships have been difficult with the people that I grew up with, and a lot of my family. And I had a cousin who called me after an incident happened, and he said, "I want to understand why you feel differently about this than I did." And it changed the way we communicate now. Someone that you've loved all your life, frankly, or at least all of his life. He's younger than I am. And it changed the way. So entering with a question is so much more powerful. So thank you for that. Are there other questions that we've missed? I hope you all were as stimulated by this conversation and the ideas and the resources as I was, and that we'll see more work across divides in honor of 9/11, because it's an important thing to do. And on a day that came out of divides, the things that divided us are what brought us to that day. It's important that we make an effort for change. So I have a couple of final things to remind you. Please stay in touch. If you need an email or something that you didn't get, you can email us at engagement@cns.gov. There are several of us on that email, and if we don't have the answer, we'll work to get it for you. Nick, someone asked if they could be in touch with you. They're a graduate student. If you want to drop into the chat the best way to reach you, that would be great. If you're still looking for other ideas and resources, I would have you listen to our other two webinars as well. And then we have another one coming up about just some broad-based general ideas for meeting some community needs and resources to help you do that. If you haven't become a champion of 9/11 Day, we hope that you will. That process is open through till August 1st. You can go on our online on our website and sign up to be a champion of 9/11. And last, but really not least, is also on our website, you'll find directions about how to register your service projects. Even if you aren't taking outside volunteers, it's so important for others when they come on this volunteer search site and look for opportunities, that they see your examples and what you're doing, because sometimes they may need to just create their own project, and your ideas and your examples will help them so much. So stay in touch, reach out when you need us, reach out if you just want to tell us something wonderful or ask for help solving a problem. Thank you, everyone. And if there are no more questions, we'll end just a couple of minutes over time.